Welp, here we are with another ranking video. Today, we're talking about Pixar's lineup from the 2020s. Recently, Inside Out has come out, and it has smashed the box office. This sequel, nobody expected to become one of the highest grossing openings for an animated movie of all time, and it's no sign of stopping. There's a chance this movie could hit $1 billion if it keeps this same trajectory throughout the summer. It's already at 300 million, so $1 billion seems a little likely. This has certainly put Pixar a little bit back on track after the wonky decade it's kinda had so far. But today's the day that I rank all these Pixar movies. Again, these are just my opinions, and I genuinely want to hear yours. What was your favorite Pixar movie so far from this decade? Coming out at the bottom is Lightyear. I honestly don't see this as a surprise to most people. This movie was just really underwhelming for such a character like Buzz Lightyear. They went for the most dull, boring, really just a real snore of a movie that honestly doesn't even feel like a Buzz Lightyear movie. It's just a random space movie that, and also Buzz Lightyear. If this was the movie that Andy watched that made him buy the Buzz Lightyear toys, I don't know what his taste in cinema is, because this movie was not good. And this movie severely tanked at the box office, well, partially because of Pixar and Disney's fumbling with Disney+, but I think there was just not a lot of interest in this movie, and they thought Toy Story was going to be able push this movie up because it's the brand, obviously, but no, this movie just really wasn't good. It was a snore fest. I really only remember the plot twist at the end, which is such a stupid plot twist with being Zurg being just Buzz from the future. It's so dumb. I can't. God. Next on the list is Onward. Now, I'm gonna be real. This movie isn't terrible, it's just meh. A fantasy world turned modern is actually a cool idea on paper, and I will say the brotherly bond in this movie is well done in this movie. But overall, in the grand scheme of Pixar films, it's really forgettable. This movie really comes up as, oh wait, damn, they made that movie. And you just completely fall into obscurity of, what it was. I mean, it did fall in and right about when the big pandemic started, but no one really talked about the film, and it was just under the rug. It was okay, no one really talked about it, the characters are just alright, and Chris Pratt is in it. So, that's where I'd place it. Moving on, next up is simply Turning Red. Now, Turning Red is a either really severely hated Pixar movie for no reason, or a really highly appraised Pixar film, and I fall in the middle. The concept it was going for with, metaphorically putting puberty as, becoming a red panda, that was actually a cool idea, and there were some cool moments in the film, and I would say that the motherly and daughterly dynamic in this film was also well done. The story itself, a little wonky, but I will say the core group of friends in the movie really bounced off of each other really well, and I will say they are a really memorable part of the film. When I come back to Turning Red, those characters kind of come up to mind. And, well, Four Town, because that's just spread across Pixar after that. And I would say the animation style was a little bit done differently here, which is always, appreciated. But overall, really not a bad film, and, I would say I would come back to it from time to time, but, it's just alright, it's fine. Next up is Luca. Now, I actually really did enjoy this film, a lot more than I thought I would. The teasers looked fine to me. I kinda was putting together where I thought this plot was gonna go, but in reality, I really thoroughly enjoyed this film. Luca and Alberto's relationship in this film is the core. It is done so well, and honestly, the main friend group of the film is done so well. The lighting and animation on this is stunning, and I really do remember these characters a lot from time to time. The soundtrack is great, And there are really emotional hits in this movie that, actually hit me. Previously, from these previous Pixar movies, the emotional beats that they have are well done, but they haven't really hit as hard normally for me. But this one, we're getting into territory where it did, and honestly, the film ended perfectly. It does not need a continuation. It is fine, and honestly, I'm pretty pissed that this didn't release in theaters. I mean, it has now, but not officially. And it's one of those movies that, not everyone would have seen. Yes, there's a lot of clips online, and, they even ship Luca and Alberto. It's not canon, but it's a really close friendship, and that's the core of the movie. Next is Soul. Now, when I first saw the trailer for this movie, I was actually pretty excited. This is such a really deep topic, honestly. I wasn't expecting them to swing this hard. And the film got delayed all the way to December, well, Christmas, and damn it, I was crying after watching the movie. This is the first Pixar movie in quite a while. In the era of the end of the 2010s, nothing really was hitting me besides Coco. Everything else was just okay. This one actually had me crying. It's a lot more deeper Pixar movie. Some kids may be too young to honestly understand this. I have sat down with people and watched this movie, and they just said, oh, it just wasn't for them, or it was a little too deep for them, and I understand that. But a lot of older audiences will really connect with this movie and its themes and its just perspective of life and what it's meant living for. There are so many instances that may seem simple to people, but the movie really shines on how precious those moments can be. And all the characters shined in this movie. The soundtrack also was kind of euphoric, and the lighting and animation was just really done well. New York just popped. And I also really wish this film got out to other audiences and, released in theaters. I'm glad it won the Oscar, but it really needed to be seen by so many more people. But it is what it is. It's available on Disney Plus. Highly recommend watching that film. Next up is Elemental. This was the train wreck turn superstar that nobody saw coming from Pixar last year. This movie was supposed to be dead on arrival. No one really saw it going anywhere, and the hype from the trailers wasn't really setting anybody off. The promotion was horrible, and I think that this movie was originally going to be a huge failure for Pixar. But internally, of watching the movie, from my perspective, it was actually really good. This is one of the Pixar movies that had, a self-insertion from the director of personal experiences, and it was really done well. It was also an immigration story, it was a rom-com, and this is kind of new territory Pixar hasn't entered, and really done well here. And I can tell that the animation was a lot more difficult with this movie, especially with it, being all elements. Wade was definitely a nightmare to animate, I can probably tell. But Wade and Ember, out of all these movies so far, are the most memorable that I've covered so far. And I think that the soundtrack itself is the best so far, and it really hits hard. Not to the point where not everyone's gonna connect with it, but I would say that you understand where these characters are coming from, and that's gonna hit you just as hard. It may not hit everyone, but the people that it will connect to, it's going to hit them hard. And this is one of those Pixar films that, deserves a checking out, honestly. It was put in such a bad position last year, but when it released on Disney Plus, a lot of people loved it. And Elemental's a pretty great film. And at number 1, I'm sure most of you saw this coming, but Inside Out 2. This was the sequel that I was most worried about. I was really worried that Pixar was going to find a way to mess up this film. And they didn't. They really stuck the landing with this movie, and it expands on the first movie so well, and I've talked about it in my previous review. but it has so many creative ideas thrown into it. Anxiety, embarrassment, ennui, envy, all those characters all shine in their own ways. The core cast being together throughout the entire movie, I really preferred a lot more than what the first film did, and aspects of Riley's life were explored more. Everything about it was done right as an inside-out sequel, and the emotional beats everyone can relate to. This is where we finally came back to what Pixar, was meant to be. And walking out of that film, a lot of positive reviews came out of it. And yeah, if you haven't seen it yet, it's a worthy watch. And man, the movie is doing amazing right now. It's at 400 million at the time of me recording this video. This is going to be Pixar's first billion movie of the decade. It definitely is. And honestly, it will be an Oscar contender. Who knows who's going to win it? It's honestly coming from me personally. I think it's going to come between Inside Out 2 or The Wild Robot. We just have to see how that film turns out from DreamWorks. But we're talking about Pixar today. Inside Out 2 was so far the best Pixar film of the decade. Now, honestly, with all these films, with the exception of Lightyear, they were all pretty decent, and going above that, good, great, and just amazing. These films weren't terrible. Pixar really hasn't put out an absolutely abominable film in quite a while, even though Lightyear was just straight up boring. It's not a terrible film, it's just boring. Alright, I'm done talking about Lightyear. But Pixar really hasn't fumbled the ball this decade. It's just been in an awkward position. But its future is uncertain. But this movie is really pushing Pixar back in the right direction. And I'm curious, what do you think of these films? Which one is your favorite? Let me know down in the comments, and I'll catch y'all in the next video. Peace out.
Da da